If you teach in a tested grade, you know how important it is to review all year long to keep those skills and standards fresh in your students' minds. Today I'm sharing just how I do that in my classroom. If you're new here, I'm Rachel Vincent and I love sharing ways to help teachers simplify their classroom and their teaching. One of the easiest ways to incorporate review into your classroom so that you're revisiting those standards that you taught. It especially works well for math, but I also find it works very well for language skills and different writing and grammar standards, is to use some sort of daily warm-up. Now, as an elementary teacher, if you teach all of the subjects, you are self-contained and have just your class. A real easy way to do that is with morning work, so having some sort of review on their desk when they come in the morning. But I know that a lot of teachers like to do sort of a soft start to welcome their students that day. So it can even be done during your math block, at the beginning of your math block, or at the beginning of your writing or language block. It is a good transition starter. So I know for us, typically our schedule has been where we go to our related arts, our music, library, gym, and when they come back, we start math. And so it is a perfect way to have either on the board or on their desk, whatever math review that you want them practicing. So when they come in and as we're transitioning from related arts to our next subject, it's kind of like what I would imagine that maybe middle and high school have when they switch classes, just something that starts that block of time with a review. I like to give my students about 5 to 7 minutes to work on this review, and then I give myself about 3 minutes to go over it. That way we're fitting it in 10 minutes. I have found with review or warm-ups or morning work, well, morning work's a little different because you typically have a more extended period of time. You will have students that finish quickly and you will have students that barely get started with that review. And as much as I wish all of the students were able to work on it first and then us to go over it, I just know that is not realistic. So by giving myself that amount of time, I know, okay, this is the time they're going to get my students who enjoy math or who are hard workers. They're just going to work on it, while the other ones, I'm going to walk around and encourage them to at least get a few problems done, and then we go over it every single time. What is the point of review if you're not actually going over it? Because if your students are practicing it wrong, they're remembering it wrong. So you need to go over any kind of review, morning work, warm-ups that you do with your students. At the beginning of the year, I have a lot of students who get frustrated that I didn't give them enough time to finish, but I tell them it's okay that you didn't finish. Let's just make sure you're copying down as I go over it. And I do the work with them, and so that they are at least writing that down, getting those answers. I require them to, in order to turn it in, it has to be complete whether they did it with me or they did it on their own. Warm-ups are something that also, that if a student is out of the classroom, whether they're absent, whether they're in a pullout, they went to the nurse, I don't require them to make that up. So I just tell my students, especially if I give them a sheet that has multiple days on it, I tell them just to write absent, or where they were in gifted and talented class with Miss Hudson or whoever they're seeing at the nurse, just so I know that they didn't just not do the work, so that there is still some sort of accountability for them. Another way I like to review that gives students more time is to include it as part of students' sort of must-do, may-do list. Or if you do a center, you could have a review center. I find in 4th grade, having centers with rotating, they're just bigger kids. I've never found it to a way that I can get it to work well. So what I like to do is have a must-do, may-do list where students, I have the things that they're required to do while I'm working with small groups, and then if they finish early, they have a list of things they can get to. And so oftentimes part of their must-do list is their spiral review. We do this weekly in our ELA block, where when I'm pulling reading groups, students are working on reading, responding to reading, writing, but there's always their daily language practice that they're working on. And then at the end, I try to, at the end of each block, go over that. There are times when I get behind in groups or things come up and I don't get to it, and we'll go over it the next day, but we do it regularly so that they know that if we don't get to it, we're going to go over 2 days the next day. This gives students more time to complete those review tasks. So if it is something that you really want them to focus on, something that's maybe a little longer, maybe it's a writing prompt or something that you really want them to have time dedicated to it, I find it easier to put it into their must-do, may-do list instead of only giving them 5 to 7 minutes. I tend to, with the warm-ups, if you will, do that with math, where I'm just trying to hit some quick standard review, because math questions typically don't take as long as maybe ELA does. Now, because I have both the warm-ups and our must-do, may-do reviews, our daily reviews, I am typically either setting up our lesson, getting ready to make sure I have everything ready to go to teach, or I am with a small group and I cannot answer questions. And so I want a way for my students to be successful if they have forgotten the skill or what they're supposed to do, which is why I love using our resource notebooks, if you will. They're just composition notebooks where we keep notes of all the standards we're learning all year, so that when they get to a question that we went over back in September, they can go and look in their notebook to find the information in order to complete the question or solve the problem. And it gives them more independence. They have a resource for them to look. Because I don't know about you, all of our curriculum is great, but it doesn't cover all of our state standards in South Carolina. So I need a resource where I know that they're going to find every standard, every type of question in that notebook. So when they're confused, they know to go to their notebook to grab that. So that is part of our spiral review. I also like to send it home before either a test or state testing, so that they have just a whole notebook full of all the standards that they can review to make sure they're ready. Now, some people also do homework. I am not a big proponent on homework. First of all, I think that if we're trying to teach people how to have a work-life balance, especially as adults, we don't want to ingrain in students that they have to do more work when they leave, because technically school is their job. However, I know there are times when we have to work outside of school, outside of our work hours. And so, you know, students are still required to study for tests, and I think it builds those study skills and things like that. But I don't like to send home like review pages and stuff like that unless a parent requests it, because I have found ways to build it into our daily routine, and it works better that way, because then I know students are actually working on it. It's them working on it, and not maybe a parent or a sibling. And then I have built in time for us to go over it. So if you do send home homework, just make sure that you're not just doing it just for busy work, that you are intentionally going over that, because that is the point of review, whether it's homework or in the classroom. So if it is something that the whole class is doing at once, I like to just put it up on my board. Like, that's what I do with our daily review for math. In our first 10 minutes, I throw up the practice questions. We use Mastery Connect for our assessments. And so it's a great way to pull in questions from there. I just screenshot them, throw it on a slide, so that we're practicing the wording and the types of questions that are asked on those assessments, because they do take those assessments for the end of the unit for math. And we also have benchmark tests 3 times a year that students are required to take, and so it just exposes them to the types of question and wording. And so I just incorporate those into our daily slides. Now, as far as something that maybe students are doing independently, or like in our must do, may do, not everyone is working on the daily review. I usually like to give them a physical sheet. I'm a really big fan of daily review that has like multiple days on one paper. So one of my favorite resources to use is from Teachers Pay Teachers. It is One Stop Teacher Shop. She has spiral review for math, for reading, and for grammar, and she probably has other ones in there. She also has it from like K to 8th maybe. Like, she has a wide range of review, so go check her out. I'll put her link down in the description. I have both her math and her grammar, which we call language. So I use her language papers. She has pre-made ones, but she also includes like an editable one so that you can change it to fit your standards, which is really nice this year because they tweaked our language standards. And so we cover most of what's on her sheet, but there's a few things that I needed to add into it. There's probably a few skills in there that are not our standards. Well, I know there are, but I most of the time leave them unless I need to like put a specific skill in, because it's a standard somewhere and the kids should know it eventually, or have learned it before and need a good review. Regardless, what I'm trying to say is that is the language review that we use weekly. It is Monday through Thursday, and she does have an option for like a quiz on Friday. I don't give quizzes for that. We get our grades from other things. So it is strictly just review spiral. I really like it. We tend to only do it on 5-day weeks, because that also gives us that like extra day if something comes up. We don't get to the review that day. We have the extra day to get the 4 days done. Like I said, I have the math one as well, but I don't use it as much. Occasionally I'll use it, but that's because we do our daily like review together at the beginning of class. I don't quite have a must do, may do for math. It's mostly here's your assignment, and when you finish, work on Dreambox, because that's the big program that our school pushes. And so that's really where I want them to get their review. Our school also got IXL last year, which is amazing, and I loved it. We use that for language too. So I kept with my language skills because I felt like a lot of times with these programs, they are geared towards like finding the student's level and giving them what they need exactly, which is wonderful, but I still need students practicing our grade level standards. I switched to just IXL for a while, and then I went back to doing IXL and our daily review with our language paper, just because it's just so beneficial. And I found that students had forgot what progressive verbs were, and so I was like, well, that comes up almost daily in our review, so I need to pull those back out. And of course, another one of my favorite ways to incorporate language skills into the holidays is with our holiday poetry. If you've been around for a while, you know that I love using these different poems. There are 5 style of poems that I teach my students at the beginning of the year, and they can do it for any season or holiday. It gives them writing skills, it gives them grammar skills, it is just poetry skills. It just incorporates everything, and I really enjoy using them. I actually just added to every single holiday that I have different templates that make cute little classroom displays, because as we know, in upper elementary, we don't always get to do all those fun, cute holiday things. This is a great way to incorporate that review and have something cute to display in your classroom or in the hallway.